Good morning, everybody. We are about to finish our book, Farmer Boy. We are reading the very last chapter, which, as I mentioned in yesterday's video, they really go hand in hand. It's almost like it's one ending chapter that's split up into two parts. Now, where did we leave off in yesterday's chapter? You remember? Almanzo got $200 for finding Mr. Thompson's pocketbook. And what does he want to buy with it? Well, it's in the bank, but he can take it out whenever he wants, and it seems like he might be getting his favorite animal. We shall see in today's chapter, though. So let's start reading. Farmer Boy is actually the name of the chapter. Now, Mr. Paddock met Almanzo and Father outside the bank. This is continuing on the same day, right after they're leaving the bank. He told Father that he had something in mind. I've been meaning to speak about it for some little time, he said, about this boy of yours. Almanzo was surprised. You ever think of making a wheelwright out of him? Mr. Paddock asked. Well, no. Father answered slowly. I can't say as I ever did. Well, think it over now, said Mr. Paddock. And a wheelwright, by the way, is a person who would be making wagons along with Mr. Paddock. He said it's a growing business, Wilder. The country's growing, population getting bigger all the time, and folks have got to have wagons and buggies. They've got to travel back and forth. The railroads don't hurt us. We're getting more customers all the time. So even as railroads are being built across the country, they're still able to have these huge railroads as well. I misspoke about that. Even with the expansion of railroads, there's still a demand for wagons and buggies. Now, it's a good opening for a smart young fellow, he says. Yes, Father said. I've got no sons of my own, and you've got two, said Mr. Paddock. Think about starting Almanzo out in life before long. Apprentice him to me, and I'll treat the boy right. If he turns out the way I expect, no reason he shouldn't have the business in time. He'd be a rich man with maybe 100 workmen under him. Whoa, how much is that? 50. He'd have 50 workers working for him one day. So he's saying Almanzo can be an apprentice, basically, as a young boy, learn from him, and eventually Almanzo would be able to take over and be pretty successful. He says, it's worth thinking about. Yes, Father said. Yes, it's worth thinking about. I appreciate what you've said, Paddock. Father did not talk on the way home. Almanzo sat beside him on the wagon seat and did not say anything either. So much had happened that he thought about it all together, all mixed up. He thought of the cashier's inky fingers, and of Mr. Thompson's thin mouth screwed down at the corners, and of Mr. Paddock's fists, and the busy, warm, cheerful wagon shop. He thought, if he was Mr. Paddock's apprentice, he wouldn't have to go to school. Oh, so that part's appealing to him. He's ready to be done. He'd often envied Mr. Paddock's workmen. Their work was fascinating. The thin, long shavings curled away from the keen edges of the planes. They stroked the smooth wood with their fingers. Almanzo liked to do that too. He would like to spread on paint with the wide paintbrush, and he would like to make fine, straight lines with the tiny pointed brush. When the buggy was done, all shining in its new paint, or when a wagon was finished, every piece, good sound hickory or oak, with the wheels painted red and the box painted green, and a little picture painted on the tailboard, the workmen were proud. They made wagons as sturdy as Father's bobsleds, and far more beautiful. This sounded like appealing work for Almanzo. Then Almanzo felt the small, stiff bank book in his pocket, and he thought about a colt. He wanted a colt with slender legs and large, gentle, wondering eyes, like Starlight's. He wanted to teach the little colt everything as he had taught Star and Bright. So Father and Almanzo rode all the way home, not saying anything. The air was still and cold, and all the trees were like black lines drawn on the snow in the sky. It was chore time when they got home. Almanzo helped do the chores, but he wasted some time looking at Starlight. He stroked the soft velvety nose, and he ran his hand along the firm curve of Starlight's little neck, under the mane. Starlight nibbled with soft lips along his sleeve. "Son, where be you?" Father called, and Almanzo ran guiltily to his milking. At supper time, he sat steadily eating, while Mother talked about what had happened. She said that never in her life. She said you could have knocked her over with a feather. And she didn't know why it was so hard to get it all out of Father. Father answered her questions, but like Almanzo, he was busy eating. At last, Mother asked him, "James, what's on your mind?" She wasn't there. She doesn't know everything that happened on that busy day. Then Father told her that Mr. Paddock wanted to take Almanzo as an apprentice. This is big news. Almanzo's old enough that he could start working pretty quickly as an apprentice, where he's learning from Mr. Paddock. Mother's brown eyes snapped, and her cheeks turned as red as her red wool dress. She laid down her knife and fork. "I never heard of such a thing," she said. "Well, the sooner Mr. Paddock gets that out of his head, the better. I hope you gave him a piece of your mind. Why on earth, I'd like to know, should Almanzo live in town at the beck and call of every Tom, Dick, and Harry?" Which just means basically every person in town. Now, why do you think she's upset? Well, Almanzo's her youngest, and she does not like the idea of him being out in town. She wants him to be home at the farm. "Paddock makes good money," said Father, though. "I guess if truth were told, he makes more money every year than I do. He looks on it as a good opening for the boy." "Well," Mother snapped. She was all ruffled like an angry hen. "A pretty pass the world's coming to if any man thinks it's a step up in the world to leave a good farm and go to town. How does Mr. Paddock make his money if it isn't catering to us? I guess if he didn't make wagons to suit farmers, he wouldn't last long." Oh, she is angry. You can tell that she doesn't like when people start to think that town people are better than farmers. A lot of people, I guess, feel that way. "That's true enough," said Father. "But there's no but about it," Mother said. "Oh, it's bad enough to see Royal come down to being nothing but a storekeeper. Maybe he'll make money, but he'll never be the man you are. Truckling to other people for his living all his days, he'll never be able to call his soul his own." Wow, those are strong words. She thinks if somebody doesn't, if they have to have a boss and they're keeping up with all of these people who come in and out of the store, maybe they're out of control about the amount of money that they make and everything. And Father, he is basically his own boss and he doesn't have employees. And for Mother, that's a good thing. It's not a good thing for everybody, but they think it's the best. Now, for a minute, Almanzo wondered if Mother was going to cry. You can tell she thought Almanzo would be the one to stay at the farm. It wasn't going to be Royal because Royal wants to be a storekeeper, and that's not worse. But she was thinking one of the boys needs to take over, and it seemed like it was going to be Almanzo. There, Father said sadly. Don't take it too much to heart. Maybe it's all for the best somehow. I won't have Almanzo going the same way, Mother cried. I won't have it, you hear me? I feel the same way you do, said Father. But the boy will have to decide. We can keep him here on the farm by law till he's 21. But it won't do any good if he's wanting to go. No, if Almanzo feels the way Royal does, we better apprentice him to Paddock while he's young enough. So Father thinks leave it up to Almanzo to decide. If he wants to be a farm man, stay at the farm. If he wants to be a town man, maybe he should go, take that apprentice job. Almanzo went on eating. He was listening, but he was tasting the good taste of roast pork and applesauce in every corner of his mouth. He took a long, cold drink of milk, and then he sighed and tucked his napkin farther in, and he reached for his pumpkin pie. He cut off the quivering point of golden brown pumpkin, dark with spices and sugar. It melted on his tongue, and all his mouth and nose were spicy. He's taking it in, he's listening, but he's also very focused on the food, in the middle of a big conversation. He's too young to know his own mind, Mother objected. Almanzo took another big mouthful of pie. He could not speak till he was spoken to, but he thought to himself that he was old enough to know he'd rather be like father than like anybody else. He did not want to be like Mr. Paddock even. Mr. Paddock had to please a mean man like Mr. Thompson, or lose the sale of a wagon. Oh, he doesn't like the idea of having to do something nice to a person who is not being kind to you. Father was free and independent. If he went out of his way to please anybody, it was because he wanted to. Almanzo likes that freedom. Suddenly, he realized that Father had spoken to him. He swallowed and almost choked on pie. Yes, Father, he said. Father was looking solemn. Son, he said, you heard what Paddock said about you being apprenticed to him? Yes, Father. Well, what do you say about it? Almanzo didn't exactly know what to say. He hadn't supposed he could say anything. He would have to do whatever Father said. Well, son, you think about it, said Father. I want you should make up your own mind. With Paddock, you'd have an easy life, in some ways. You wouldn't be out in all kinds of weather. That's true. Cold wintry nights you could lie snug in bed and not worry about your young stock freezing. Rain or shine, wind or snow, you'd be under shelter. You'd be shut up inside walls. Likely, you'd always have plenty to eat and wear and money in the bank. James, Mother said. You can tell she does not like him saying good things about it. That's the truth, and we must be fair about it, Father answered. But there's the other side too, Almanzo. You'd have to depend on other folks, son, in town. Everything you got, you'd get from other folks. So unlike farm life, you have to buy things everywhere you go, and you have to make money through, selling things to other people. Farmers, they just make their own, according to our poem even. You eat your own lamb, your own chicken and ham, you shear your own sheep and you wear it. That's what a farmer does. Now, a farmer depends on himself and the land and the weather. If you're a farmer, you raise what you eat, you raise what you wear, and you keep warm with wood out of your own timber. You work hard, but you work as you please, and no man can tell you to go or come. You'll be free and independent, son, on a farm. So there are good things about life in the town. There's also good things about the farm life. What do you think he's going to choose? Now, Almanzo squirmed. Father was looking at him too hard, and so was Mother. Almanzo did not want to live inside walls and please people he didn't like. And never have horses and cows and fields? He wanted to be just like Father, but he didn't want to say so. You take your time, son. Think it over, Father said. You make up your mind when you want. Father, Almanzo exclaimed. Yes, son? Can I really tell you what I want? Yes, son, Father encouraged him. I want a colt, Almanzo said. Could I buy a colt all my own with some of that $200, and would you let me break him? Oh, that's what he wants more than anything. Father's beard slowly widened with a smile. He put down his napkin and leaned back in his chair and looked at Mother. Then he turned to Almanzo and said, Son, you leave that money in the bank. Almanzo felt everything sinking down inside him. He doesn't want him to get the colt. And then, suddenly, the whole world was a great shining, expanding glow of warm light. For Father went on, if it's a colt you want, I'll give you starlight. Oh my goodness, it's his dream come true. Father, Almanzo gasped, for my very own? Yes, son, he said. You can break him and drive him. And when he's a 4-year-old, you can sell him or keep him just as you want to. We'll take him out on a rope first thing tomorrow morning, and you can begin to gentle him. Oh. Wasn't that such a sweet ending? So he doesn't get just any colt. He gets Starlight, the one he loves more than any. Oh, and he is going to be a farmer through and through for the rest of his life. Remember that this is a true story. He ends up marrying Laura Ingalls. Laura Ingalls, and she becomes Wilder by marrying him. So they live a life that goes along with exactly what he wanted. I have a little bit here that tells background of them, kind of getting into what happened after this when he got older. So Laura Ingalls Wilder was born in a log cabin, which you would have heard about in Little House in the Big Woods that you read as a second grader. She and her family traveled by covered wagon across the Midwest. And some of the other books in the series follow that. Now later, Laura and her husband, Almanzo Wilder, made their own covered wagon trip with their daughter Rose to Mansfield, Missouri. There, believing in the importance of knowing where you began in order to appreciate how far you've come, Laura wrote about her childhood growing up on the American frontier. So they ended up in Missouri, just pretty close to here, just barely north. So what a wonderful story. I've really loved reading this with you guys, and I hope you have too. I would encourage you to read some of the other books from the series if you're interested in more. Technically, according to the order, you'd start with Little House in the Big Woods and then Farmer Boy. So if you were here at the school last year, you would have already read Little House in the Big Woods. And then several of them follow just Laura again. Little House on the Prairie, on the banks of Plum Creek, by the shores of Silver Lake, the Long Winter, Little Town on the Prairie. And then she and Almanzo meet, and there's a couple of books about them. These Happy Golden Years and the First 4 Years, when they meet and get married. So they're all really wonderful books. I would encourage you to read Little House on the Prairie would be the best one to read after this if you're interested. Okay, I will talk to you all later. Tomorrow we'll go over, or there's going to be a study guide to complete and a test on Friday. Then we'll start a new book, Jungle Book, next Monday. Talk to you later. Bye.